Hi, welcome to Lighthouse Living Room. We are going to continue with our study in the book of John. I think it's important to note that there's some things that maybe we have missed in the fact that we are continuing our study. Last night we started the book of Luke in chapter 3, and we're talking about many of the things that actually John spoke about, even though Matthew, Mark, Luke, John was after the book of Luke. But actually, the fact is that John is a particularly interesting book in the way that he brings forth the word in a way that you can understand what Jesus was going through. For instance, tonight we're going to be in chapter 9. So get your Bibles out, get your cup of coffee or soda or iced tea or whatever it is, and let's sit down together and we're going to take a look at something. And I found out, not just tonight, but I just have discovered that what Jesus was talking about in chapter 9 actually goes into chapter 10. And when he talks about two things, he has the I am statements that he makes in John, that John makes a point of separating out and making, I could say, a lot of comment about it. And there's two things that are said that have everything to do with what we're going to read tonight out of chapter 9. One, I am the door. The second portion is the I am the good shepherd in the English version. But in the Greek, it actually means I am the shepherd, the good. It means I am the shepherd, the good. It denotes two different separate thoughts in regards to what he's saying. And we'll bring that into this study tonight, of which I think that will probably run way over on time, and we'll have to go back and take a look at it. But two things I wanted you to note, between the time of feeding the 5,000, all of the situation with the woman who was caught in adultery, and we're going into chapter 9, there are some things that were said, that Jesus said, that I think is really important for us to kind of grapple with a little bit. One of the things that was important to note, that Jesus was accused, that he said, has anything ever come out of Galilee? That was good. It's pretty funny, actually. What he was saying, he said, who is he? In chapter 7, verse 40, said, who is he? He says, therefore many of the crowd, when they heard this saying, said, truly this is a prophet. Others said, this is the Christ. But some said, will the Christ come out of Galilee? To me, it's fascinating, because we have to remember, if we take a look at this from the viewpoint of the people that were there at that time, is that there were 6 other deities that actually resided in Galilee that were outside the realm of Judaism, and those deities were invoked and promoted by the governor. And we're learning that in the book of Luke about what was going on there, how he was trying to please the people by doing whatever he could to make them happy, I guess would be the best term. And so we see that, and then we notice that down below that, and from chapter 7, verse 40, down below, he says this. In 45, he goes on to the authorities that were there watching Jesus do his thing. We're being provoked by Jesus all the time. There's a lot of hostility that takes place between chapter 7 and chapter 9. And the hostility is so intense that it's causing those people who are in charge, and we'll find out in a moment how brutal it was and how they wanted, and twice between 7 and 9, that they're trying to pick up stones and trying to actually stone him to death. But he slips out just in the nick of time. But in verse 45, he says this, which is interesting. He says, then the officers came to the chief priests and the Pharisees and said to them, why have you not brought him? In other words, why haven't you arrested him? And he says, and the officers who went to actually arrest him stood on the outside and listened to him for a while, and this is what they said. They said, no man ever spoke like this man. And the Pharisees answered them, are you also deceived? Have any of the rulers of the Pharisees believed in him? But this crowd that does not know the law is accursed. Now, that's a big, heavy statement. They that don't know the law are accursed. It funnels everything that's being said here into chapter 9. Why? Because this is some of the things that are being projected, if you will, by those that are in charge, seeing what Jesus is doing. Tonight I talked about spiritual blindness, and I titled it that in chapter 9, the healing of the blind man from birth. And then he goes on to talk about in chapter 8, which I think is Jesus begins to defend his self-witness, in other words, his self-promotion, and that's in verse 13 of chapter 8. Then he goes on to verse 31, which I thought was really interesting as we move into chapter 9. As you see him going through this, in verse 31 it says, "Then Jesus said to the Jews who believed him, 'If you abide in my word, you are my disciples indeed, and you shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free.'" And then it begins to talk about in verse 37 of chapter 8, it talks about Abraham's seed and Satan's, and it talks about all of this conflict. And Jesus speaks a lot. If you have a red letter edition, almost 2/3 of chapter 8 is Jesus speaking, defending himself. And then it comes to this in verse 59, which ends chapter 8. It says this, "Then they took up stones to throw at him, but Jesus hid himself and went out of the temple, going through the midst of them, and so passed by." Now, what happens next for all of you that are listening tonight, and those of you that have been studying and looking at the book of John, Michael Card, our guide, if you will, the one that's been doing the videos we've been following, you'll finish up with some of what he is being talked about here, and all of the things that were going on in John's life and all that was going on in Jesus' life. Again, John is seeing this 40 years later, not right at the moment, not first person at that time, but first person 40 years later reflecting on what he saw. But here comes probably one of the biggest and probably mind blowers for all of you tonight, and it was for me a little bit because of what Jesus was talking about here. The man who was born blind from birth is going to be a pawn in the Pharisees and Sadducees coming after Jesus and Jesus coming after the Pharisees. The blindness that he's going to talk about, and some quotes that I have found in this lovely book that I've been able to share with you time to time. Some very interesting things are being said about him. We're going to read some of this and we're going to talk about it. But there's something that we need to understand that's going on. The Pharisees and Sadducees thought the only way that they could get rid of Jesus is if everyone who confessed Jesus as the Messiah, they would excommunicate from the church, from the synagogue. Now, what did that mean? It was a pretty serious thing at that point in time. All of Jewish life surrounded the synagogue or the temple. It was really important to be connected to that because otherwise you're on the outside looking in and you're a Gentile and you don't want to be a Gentile. That's not a problem. That's a big problem. But Jesus saw something here that was quite interesting. In fact, he even dismisses it when his disciples see him staring at the man that is sitting by one of the gates and begging for his livelihood. In an imagination, if you could wrap your head around it, the best way that you can wrap your head around it, Jesus is staring at this man, and the word that they use is gazing on him, but he's staring at him. And as he's staring at him, something very interesting happens. The disciples began to ask questions that have to do with Jewish law. One of the questions is a big one. Who sinned here? Why is he in this condition? And Jesus says something that he didn't say anyplace else, and which, even more to the point, is that the way he said it and the reason he said it was to prove a point. And the point is that he was going to show that for lack of a better term, the old religion was not the new religion. It was not what Jesus was giving away. what he was doing is he was talking about staying within the law, doing everything you're supposed to do the right thing, to be a good Jew. And then on top of that, something else happened here that is extraordinary. And extraordinary in the fact that this man who was born blind has an intertwined conversation with the Sadducees and the Pharisees in a way that actually opens up their weaknesses. They could not see, just like the man that was at the pool of Bethesda, that they could not see that he was healed. They could only see that he was carrying a mat in violation of Sabbath day rules. They couldn't see the blind man seeing, because if they saw him seeing, they would have known that Jesus was who he said he was. They could only see that it was a violation because he put some spit into some dirt and made clay and applied it to the guy's eyes and then said, go and what? Wash yourself. 3 areas of work. 1, he made something, he applied something, and then he told him to go and do something. And in doing those things, violated the law. So let's jump into this and let's dissect this a little bit. It's super interesting. So at least it is to me. Hopefully it is to you as well. He says, now, as Jesus passed by, he saw a man who was blind from birth. Get the picture. He's standing there looking at this guy. And his disciples asked him, have you ever been around somebody that has a really amazing degree in something like engineering? And then those of you that are around that have no clue what engineering's about start asking him questions based on his knowledge over your lack of knowledge. Look what he says. This is fascinating. And his disciples asked him, saying, Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he would be born blind? And then Jesus dismisses what they're saying. I'm not going to get into a pharisaical argument with my disciples. I mean, come on, really? But he says, neither this man nor his parents sinned, but that the works of God should be revealed in him. Here's the key, verse 4. I must work the works of him who sent me while it is day. The night is coming when no man can work. As long as I am in the world, I am the light of the world. Now, contradicting what was going on here in a way that is even more impressive. So what does he do next? When he had said these things, he spat on the ground, spat, got some stuff, and he made clay with his saliva, and he anointed the eyes of the man with the clay. This is on the Sabbath, remember now? He's doing something, he's actually working. Then he takes it and he puts it on his eyes. Doesn't matter, the guy's blind, it ain't going to matter to him. But he says, now he tells him what? He says, now go to the pool of Siloam, which I love this because Siloam comes from the word sent. Sent. So before everything ever happened, the pool was named for what was going to happen with the prophet or the Messiah, Jesus. Follow this. This is fascinating. So he went and washed and came back seeing. Now, he's seeing, he at least knew how to get back to his neighborhood. Now, why do I know that? It's because this is what it says. Follow with me, verse 8. Therefore the neighbors and those previously had seen that he was blind said, is not this he who sat and begged? In other words, the neighbors knew their neighbors. Won't you be my neighbor? Just to say. And here's these guys saying this. Look what they're saying. He says, and seeing that he was blind, said, is this not he who sat and begged? And then some said, This is crazy. I mean, this is incredible. So obviously then none of these people that are supposedly neighbors knew this guy very well. Because look what it says next. Some said, yeah, this is he. Others said, he's like him. He said, but then he speaks out and he says, I am he. Therefore they said to him, how were your eyes opened? He answered and said, a man, because he was blind and he left blind. He said, a man called Jesus made clay and anointed my eyes and said, go wash in the pool of Siloam and wash. So I went and washed, and I received sight. And they said to him, where is he? He said, I don't know. Now, this is when it gets interesting. The Pharisees, he went to the priest. Why did he do that? Because that's what you're supposed to do. You got to remember this guy now. Now, I want you to get this. This guy was born blind. He's never seen his mother. He's never seen a tree. He's never seen green grass. He didn't know what a palm tree looked like. He didn't know what animals looked like. He didn't know what his mother's face looked like. He didn't know what his father's face looked like. And he didn't know who Jesus was. He just knew that this guy told me, and after he put clay on my eyeballs, which is pretty disgusting, and said, go wash. And he did. And he was healed. This is interesting. So they brought him to who was formerly blind, to the Pharisees. Now I want you to get this. Look at what they say to him. And listen to the conversation, because it's so important to get this. They brought him to formerly was blind to the Pharisees. Now it was a Sabbath when Jesus made the clay and opened his eyes. Then the Pharisees also asked him again how he had received his sight. First time now, catch this, first time. He said to them, he put clay on my eyes. Second time he's telling the story, first time to the Pharisees. And he said, he put clay on my eyes, and I washed, and I see. Therefore some of the Pharisees said, this man is not from God, because he does not keep the Sabbath. Others said, how can this man, who is a sinner, do such signs? And there was a division among them. Now listen to this. Listen to what the man whose eyes were opened says. They said to the blind man again, what do you say about him because he opened your eyes? He elevates the conversation. He said, he is a prophet. Oh no, you don't tell the Pharisees he's a prophet, especially on the Sabbath, especially when they don't even recognize the fact that the guy was blind and now he sees. Look what happens next. But the Jews did not believe concerning him that he had been blind and received his sight until they called, guess now, they have to get somebody else. They get the parents to come. Come on, we can't believe this guy. We got to get somebody else to tell us. So what does he say? So that they called the parents to him and received his sight. Now the parents are freaking out. Why are they freaking out? Because it's been said that if anybody says anything about this person Jesus, then they're going to be excommunicated from the church, the synagogue. So they asked him, saying, is this your son, who you say is born blind? Then how does he see? His parents take and push the question off. This is what's interesting. He says, the parents answered him and said, we know that this is our son, and we know that he was born blind. But by what means he now sees, we do not know. Or who opened his eyes, we do not know. But he's of age. Ask him. He'll speak for himself. Now they've already heard it once. Now they're going to hear it again. His parents said these things because, why? They feared the Jews. They feared the Jews. For the Jews had agreed already that if anyone confesses that he was the Christ, they would be put out of the synagogue. This is a big deal. Therefore his parents said, he is of age, ask him. So they again called the man who was blind and said to him, give God the glory. We know that this man is a sinner. this guy who hasn't been to school ups the ante. He answers and said, whether he's a sinner or not, I do not know. One thing I know, that though I was blind, now I see. Oh, this infuriates these guys. Then he said to him again, what did he do to you? How did he open your eyes? Then he answered them, takes it up another level. He says, I told you already, and you did not listen? Why do you want to hear it again? Do you also want to become his disciples? Oh my gosh, this is going downhill in a hurry, big time. We know that God spoke to Moses. As for this fellow, we do not know where he's from. And so here's a guy that's seen for the first time and definitely has a mind that's sharper than these nitwits. And look what he says next. The man answered and said to them, why, this is a marvelous thing, that you do not know where he is from, yet he has opened my eyes. Now we know that God does not hear sinners, but if anyone who worshiper of God and does his will, he hears him. Since the world began, we have been unheard of that anyone opened the eyes of one who was born blind. If this man were not from God, he could do nothing. He just told the Pharisees what they should have been asking. They answered and said to him, you are completely born in sins, and you are teaching us? And they cast him out. In other words, they booted him out of the synagogue. Now, why is this important? There's a quote in here that I thought was really kind of interesting. Here's one of them. It says this. He said, it is that of organized religion in opposition to Jesus, and of Jesus in opposition to organized religion. You get that? Think about this for a moment now. All that's going on, everything that's happening here, is being forwarded onto a platform in which he is causing some really big tension within the organized religion. Look what happens next. True vision and true blindness. It's so easy to see this when you just listen to the, if you will, conversation, I guess. Now, the question was always a big one, and I thought it was really interesting in regards to how Jesus answers this and speaks to him. Now, I want you to understand two things that are taking place here. He's just been kicked out of the synagogue, of which he couldn't go into to begin with, because he was considered unclean, because he was out begging, because of all the other reasons that go with this. There's a lot of what do you want to call it? Confusion in this fact. In fact, a lot of people freak out about the fact that he's actually even there talking to the Pharisees, and they're trying to make argument that this, that, and the other. But one thing, if you noticed in my conversation, they didn't say, wow, that's a wonderful thing that you can see now. Same thing with the guy that had the mat under his hands. It's a wonderful thing that you're not a derelict anymore. You can actually walk. It's a wonderful thing when God does something outside of the realm of what really, frankly, stupid people do. And he began to share with him this. And this is what's so amazing, because this goes together, if you will, with these two thoughts. I want to come to the end of this chapter, and then I want to read to you a couple of things that I think are really interesting as we kind of tie this all together. Have you got this so far now? Do you see what's going on? Do you see the opposition? Do you see all of the ugliness that's going on? They made a mandate. They have to stick with the mandate. The mandate is if you, just like in the United States, if you don't wear a mask, you can't come in here. If you don't get vaccinated, you can't do that. But this is all about this kind of thing. It's all about this whole operation. Look what he says. Verse 35. Jesus heard that they cast him out. In other words, they excommunicated him. And when he had found him, he said to him, do you believe in the Son of God? Now, I I don't believe that this is exactly the way it was said. Now, why do I say that? Because for him to say what he's saying directly, how can I say it? Doesn't violate, but what it does is it actually changes the context of what Jesus has said all along. All the way through John, he has said this, Son of Man. Do you believe in him? He's talking about Son of God here. He's talking about deity. Think about this for a minute. And he answers and says, who is he, Lord, that I may believe in him? And Jesus said to him, you have both seen him, and now it is he who is talking with you. Then he said, Lord, I believe, and he worshiped him. And Jesus said, for judgment I have come into this world, that those who do not see may see, that those who see may be made blind. Then some of the Pharisees who were there, listen, they're watching all this all the whole time. Look what he says. Look what the Pharisees say. Pharisees were there, heard these words, and said to them, are we blind also? And he said to them, if you were blind, I want you to catch this. This is really interesting. He said, if you were blind, you would have no sin. He said, if you were blind, you would have no sin. Why? Because they would have not had a preconceived idea of what religion, organized religion, looked like. They would have had a whole different mentality towards it, just like this blind man who now can see. He has a whole different mentality. He saw what happened, he received what happened, and he acknowledged what happened, and now he is asking to be part of that, because what does he do next? If you were blind, you would have no sin. But now you say, we see, therefore your sin remains. Let me find this note that I had taken and put to there. Cutting this man off. It's just is amazing to me. Here's something that's said in my my lovely book that I have been reading, and all of the things that have been happening. It was said that the word, I love this thought, the word worshipped is interesting because it's not really true. What he did was that he accepted him as the arbitrator of his relief. He accepted him as God on the planet. He accepted him as the one who completed him, that had taken him out of the anguish of being, if you will, a castaway, and made him become part of the communion. And this is what it was saying as we observe this, and at the end of the scripture, it says, there's a tremendous significance in this incident. The whole system of Judaism, as it was then, is seen as blind. So blind that it does not discover the value and the wonder wrought, or the understanding it as a sign. Blinded by its loyalty to technicalities and traditions, which only blast the soul away from life. That system put this man out. Then we see two people, the Word incarnate, being Jesus, and the only begotten Son of the Father, full of grace and truth, with his excommunicated man. Jesus receiving this man's worship, in that moment, started the new economy that was going to be, it was born right there. Changing of the guard, changing of the concept, changing of worthless religion based on the divinity and economy that was being challenged by the person of Jesus. I say worthless religion because it became more of tradition and more of pomp and circumstance. It had nothing to do with divine economy. Look what it says next. It's powerful. What happened that day was not, in the last analysis, that organized religion excommunicated a man. It was that a man in fellowship with Jesus excommunicated organized religion. That's where we're at today. This is where we're at this very moment in life. We are actually at a place, a decision-making place, and where we're going to either endorse what Jesus is and be, and I don't want to use the word proud, but our faith should be overwhelming the darkness around us instead of our faith being subjected to the blindness of organized religion. You follow what I'm saying? This brings us to a place where we are going to change the economy, and we're going to show it in the divine economy that we are capable of worshiping Jesus in spirit and in truth instead of in darkness and in hiding. Think about that. Because look what takes place next in this very interesting pair of, if you will, nuances. Chapter 10 talks about something that we had talked about. The door, and I've got to find this. I've got to share this with you. I've shared one from Alfred Edersheim, but I had never heard one quite like this. I thought this was incredible. Now, here's one. Here it says, Jesus the true shepherd. Most assuredly I say to you, he who does not enter the sheepfold by the door, but climbs up some other way, the same is a thief and a robber. But he who enters by the door is the shepherd of the sheep. To him the doorkeeper opens, and the sheep hear his voice, and they calls his own sheep by name and leads them out. And when he brings out his own sheep, and he goes before them, and the sheep follow him, for they know his voice. Yet they will by no means follow a stranger, but will flee from him, for they do not know the voice of a stranger. Jesus uses illustration, but they did not understand the things in which he spoke to them. I think it's pretty obvious what he's speaking to them. He's talking about the Pharisees and Sadducees. He says their voice is not being heard anymore. But the one who has come from the wilderness, the one that was baptized by John the Baptist, and he came out, and his father says to him from outside, and everybody there heard it, this is my beloved son, in whom I am what? Well pleased. He's going forth to change the course of direction of everything that's going on. I am the door, he says. Then he goes into the next scene. Next scene. Then Jesus said to them again, most assuredly I say to you that I am the door of the sheep. All whoever came before me are thieves and robbers, but the sheep did not hear them. I am the door. If anyone enters by me, he will be saved, and he will go in, and he will find pasture, in and out, and find pasture. The thief does not come but except to steal, kill, and destroy. I have come that they may have life, and they may have it more abundantly. I am, and verse 11 is the key, I am the good shepherd. Now, remember, shepherding was not a, how can I say it, in a caste system, it was probably next to someone who does leather. Now, leather tanning was a stinky, disgusting business, but everybody needed leather, so you buy it from this gentleman. But the fact is, this guy couldn't make it into the synagogue because he was always unclean, because he was dealing with dead things. Then you take it up to the next level, which is the shepherd. The shepherd's kind of a little bit higher, but not quite the same as a leather worker. But the fact is, what is his job? His job, again, low on the totem pole. But this is exactly what Jesus is speaking to, the good shepherd. In other words, what you see as shepherd is not the shepherd I see the good shepherd. And in the Greek, it's rendered this way. He says, I am the shepherd, the good. I am the shepherd, the good. That's what it's in the Greek. And it says that for the reason. Now, it's very interesting. He goes on to say this. Because he starts to separate the job of the shepherd compared to that of a hireling. Now, what is a hireling? Who's he talking about? Pharisees and Sadducees. He's talking about those that are supposed to be taking care of the good things. For 400 years, they've been doing their job. The trouble is they destroyed it. They totally messed up. They just didn't do the right thing. Here's the thought. Now, he says, I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd gives his life for the sheep. But the hireling, who is not the shepherd, the one who does not own the sheep, sees the wolf coming and leaves the sheep and flees. And the wolf catches the sheep and scatters them. The hireling flees because he is a hireling and does not care about the sheep. I am the good shepherd, and I know my sheep, and I am known by my own. He goes on to say, as the Father knows me, Even so I know the Father, and I lay down my life for the sheep. And the other sheep I have, now this is a big deal, because what's going to happen here is he's going to show you how everything gets put into one sheepfold. In other words, the gathering of the world, if you will. Follow me now. Jesus cracks me up anyway. Some of the stuff he does, you got to be sharp. And other sheep I have which are not of this fold, them also I must bring, and they will hear my voice, and there will be one flock and one shepherd. Ooh, now that's getting interesting. Therefore my Father loves me, because I lay down my life, that I may take it again. No one takes it from me, but I lay it down of myself. I have power to lay it down, and I have power to take it again. This command I have received from my Father. Therefore, no kidding. Therefore, there was division again in the Jews because of these sayings. And many of them said, he has a demon and is mad. Oh, he's always demon. Let me rephrase this. He's racist. Have you been hearing that term lately? This is what we're talking about. It's the same narrative, same theology. He says, why do you listen to him? Others said, these are not the words of one who has a demon. Can a demon, here comes back the blind man again. He says, can a demon open the eyes of the blind? Not so much. Verse 22 goes on to say something even more interesting. Now, it was the feast of dedication in Jerusalem, and it was winter, and Jesus walked in the temple in Solomon's porch. Then the Jews surrounded him and said to him, how long do you keep us in doubt? If you're the Christ, tell us plainly. Jesus said to them, I told you, and you did not believe. The works that I do in my Father's name, they bear witness of me. But you do not believe, because you're not of my sheep. He just said it before. He said, my sheep listen to my voice. They don't listen to somebody else. The hirelings have got them confused. They've got them thinking in different ways. But you do not believe because you're not of my sheep. I said to you, my sheep hear my voice. I know them. They follow me. I give them eternal life, and they never perish. Neither shall anyone snatch them out of my hand. My Father, who has given them to me, is greater than all, and no one is able to snatch them out of my Father's hand. I and my Father are one. And again, it picks up the narrative, if you will, of the picking up stones and wanting to stone him to death. Now, I want to share with you something that I have never seen this in my commentary, and I had to get the old highlighter out and refer to this. I think it's at the end of the chapter here. Oh gosh. It's a story about where were you? 22, yeah. Office of Dedication. Sorry, I hate to have dead airspace. I wanted to read it to you in its full. Oh, I hate this. Okay, I'll have to catch it next time. But there it is. It's my life, believe me. So, observe the ascending scale in which the consciousness of Jesus. This is something that was said of a guy that was teaching the man who wrote this book, who had gone to Jerusalem and been in the East for many, many, many years. I give an example of Alfred Edersheim. Alfred Edersheim said that one time he was with a friend of his. He spent 35 years in Jerusalem. And 35 years that he was there, one time he said he went down and there was 4 or 5 shepherds down at a river. Not a river like we would think, but the water is moving very slowly. Sheep won't drink from water that is vibrating or dancing or agitating in any way. They like it nice and calm and smooth. There's 4 of them down there. And so he walks up to one of the shepherds, and he says to them, he says, I want to call your sheep. And he's basically told him good luck with that. And he goes, well, teach me how to make this whistle. And so he says when he would pick up, he would do that. So they had come to this river, and he had practiced for miles, practiced this call. And he went down there, and he says, there was like 200-300 sheep down there, all drinking at the same time. And one by one, the shepherds whistled, some particular whistle. Sheep poked their nose up, looked, followed them down the road. Did the same thing. And here's the last shepherd, the guy that he had been whistling, trying to whistle and make the sound perfect. And so he whistled, and it was Edersheim whistled, and these sheep poked their nose up out of the water, looked up there, whistled again, and turned around and put their nose right back in the water. And he goes, I don't believe it. And so the shepherd whistled one time, heads up out of the water, began to come up to the hill. And as he started to walk, they just all followed him where he's going. This is similar to that. And the reason why I want to share it with you is that I have found very few places where this really shows you what the Father had given to his Son and how his Son had given to the people. And this is what he represented. In a nutshell, how the shepherd, the good, is the one who cares for us the way that he wants to. This is so the scene that Jesus receiving worship from the man who was born blind and the excommunicated man, a man put out of the synagogue, is received into the relationship with God in an act of submission and his worship. The tremendous significance of this incident, the whole system of Judaism as it was, is seen blind. It's so blind that it doesn't discover the wonderful value of what was happening. And in this economy, in this particular economy, this is the thing that is interesting. But this is what he said. He said he saw, he was with this man, Sir something, and he was with this man, and he went down, and he saw a shepherd out in the field, an Arab, not a Jewish man, but an Arab. And he went to the man, the shepherd, and began to talk to him in Farsi, as Arab is not the same as Hebrew. And he said to him, he said, hey, could you show me your fold? He said, sure. He said, I could show you my fold. And he went up on the hill, and he showed him this fold. And he goes, is this where you keep your sheep? He said, yeah. He says, at night, when light is gone, he says, we put them into this place, and they all bed down. And I says, but he says to him, he says, how do you keep intruders out? How do you keep the wolf out and all that? And he said, he says, that's very simple. This was not a Jewish man. This was not a believer. This was an Arab. And he said to him, he said, how do you protect the sheep? He says, like this. And he laid down in the opening, which was only about 2.5 feet in width, and it was hedged by what I call Jerusalem thorns, which are about 3 inches long. And it was hedged so nothing could come in around the fold. But he laid down in the opening, and as he laid there, he said, well, how do you protect? He says, this is where I sleep. He says, the sheep cannot get out unless they leap over me, and I'll know it. And nothing can come in unless it leaps over me, and I'll know it. And he just went, wow. Because all of a sudden he had John's gospel come back to him. He said, I am the door to the sheep. And I'm the good shepherd. I protect the sheep. I keep evil away from them. I protect them all night long, all day long. Everything that happens to them, I'm in control of, Jesus is saying. And I wonder if today we have not advocated our authority and given it away in such a way that we don't know who's in charge of our lives, really. I'm hoping for you tonight that if a little bit of what I've shared hits home in a way that you can understand the fact that Jesus is looking for you. He said that he would go. He said if there's one missing out of the flock, he would go look for you. And if you made a confession of faith, or somebody in your family has made a confession of faith, or something that's going on and he's promised you something, believe me that he will follow through with what he said, that he will protect. He will be part of the answer, not part of the problem. So with that said, this is the last thing I want to share with you. He said that his rod and his staff, they comfort me. The shepherd that I know, the one that is in Israel, has a long shepherd's staff that has a hook on it, traditionally. And on the other end, there's about a 3-pound rock that is made to kind of screw onto the end of that. And what is that for? Is that when something tries to come into your life that is dangerous to you, the shepherd, the good shepherd, the good, would wield that staff, and he would take out his aggression on whatever was coming. If it was a wolf, he would plant it right in the middle of his forehead. What did that do? Killed them. So in your life, when you see things that are going awry, do yourself a favor. Call on the good shepherd. Call on the God who cares more than you know. Let's rise up, church. Let's do something more than what we've been doing. Let's not be in the corner waiting for somebody to give us orders, but let's rise up and be real followers, truly finding that there's life in the Master. Thank you so much for listening, and thank you for being here tonight. I pray, God, that you would just you would share this, like it, and share it with some other people, some people that need hope, because there's a lot of people that are despondent out there, and I can't believe that we're going to see this go away anytime soon. So why don't we just do something about making it go away? Amen. Father, thank you, Lord, for your goodness. Thank you for the people. Thank you for the life that you've given us through your Son. And I pray, God, that you would do whatever you need to do to bring us to the place that we need to be to understand what the Scriptures is trying to tell us. We are tied together as one, and being one means that we all need to support each other. Be blessed tonight. Be blessed, and let Jesus be Jesus in your life. Amen. See you next week.